we know that there's still lines for food, so please be patient. Just typically happens whenever we have Indian food that it takes a little while for people to get situated. So before we get started today, I do want to mention that we do have dues with the Federalist Society. Again, you don't have to pay dues to be a member, but in order to vote in our elections in March, we do require that you pay the $5 dues. You can pay them to Thad. He's our gentleman walking right here. So you can pay him anytime after you get a member. So on behalf of the Federalist Society and HLS, I'd like to welcome you to today's event, a debate entitled Soda Tax, Fast Food, and Obesity Litigation, Hyperactive Name State or Necessary Public Protections, featuring Ted Frank of the Manhattan Institute and, of course, Ohio State College of Public Health Professor Klein. The debate format, as usual, is a 12-minute introduction for each speaker. And again, we always start with our visiting speakers, so the non-Ohio State speaker, that would be Mr. Frank. Then we have a 10-minute rebuttal in the same order, and then with time remaining, we take questions from the audience. Yeah, we'll actually do shorter rebuttals at the request of the speakers, so a little more time for questions from the audience. There's a bigger crowd today, so that's fine. Also, I'll give a brief introduction to both our speakers before we get started. Professor Elizabeth Klein is a professor here at Ohio State College of Public Health. She earned a BS in Community Health Education from Western Michigan University, an MPH in Epidemiology and Biostatistics from the University of California, Berkeley, and a PhD in Epidemiology from the University of Minnesota. She's written a number of articles on tobacco and alcohol public health topics, and her research interests go on include, of course, social and ecological predictors of health behavior change around obesity and tobacco use among youth and young adults especially. Recently, Professor Klein worked as a senior research associate at Nationwide Children's Hospital, where she led a team in the design of obesity treatment programs for preschool children. Ted Frank earned his undergraduate degree from Brandeis University. He earned his JD at, where else? The University of Chicago Law School. He's like our 50th speaker from there. It's a great law school, apparently. He went on to be a law clerk for Judge Frank Easterbrook, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit. For almost a decade, he worked as a litigator following that. Mr. Frank has written for law reviews, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, American Spectator, and has testified before Congress multiple times on various legal issues. He writes for the award-winning legal blogs pointoflaw.com and Overlawyered, and the Wall Street Journal has called him the leading tort reform advocate in the nation. At the Manhattan Institute, Mr. Frank specializes in product liability, class actions, and civil procedure. And with that, please join me in welcoming first Mr. Ted Frank.
Who better to talk about obesity class action litigation than an obese class action litigator? A very wise scholar once told me that when you do a PowerPoint presentation, you should start with a funny cartoon. I didn't do that. Obesity is a growing problem across the world, and I want to emphasize across the world, and that will come into play later. As people become more obese, they have health problems, diabetes, heart problems, and so on. And as that increases health expenditures, and as the government takes on more and more responsibility for health expenditures, it becomes a growing public policy problem. The problem is, certainly in the United States, we have incoherent policy approaches. There's a lot of government advertising on the issue of obesity, telling people to eat healthily and so on. But on the other hand, we have government subsidies through the Department of Agriculture. The New York Times had an article this weekend, the Department of Agriculture going to Domino's Pizza and encouraging them to add cheese to their pizzas to sell more cheese, and a variety of other restaurants like that. There are other government responses. For example, in New York City, they require labeling on restaurant menus. Not all of these procedures work the way they're intended. For example, there have been economic studies that show that when people see all the calorie counts on menus on the restaurants, that actually encourages them to order more food than they would otherwise. Because what happens is that they see a very high calorie item on the menu, and then order something, they see a 900 calorie item on the menu, and they order a 500 calorie item instead of a 400 calorie item, and they think that they're being good because they're not getting the 900 calorie item. So it's not entirely clear that government attempts to manipulate public behavior have been successful. That has led some people in the legal community, certainly much more so 10 years ago than today, to wonder whether the litigation system could provide a public policy answer for this. And the problem here is that the mechanism to do that is the class action procedure. And there are a variety of requirements before a case can be brought as a class action. And it's hard to fit the square pegs of obesity policy into the round hole of these procedural requirements. In a class action, it's required that it's an aggregate litigation. It's required that everybody has the same sort of claim. But when you're talking about causation and obesity, it's a highly individualized issue. There are genetics involved, there are eating patterns involved, there are exercise patterns involved. And all of these contribute to it. And just as a matter of simple nutrition, what causes somebody to gain weight is that their calorie intake exceeds their calorie output, how much they exercise. So, for example, the cause of somebody in this classroom or this auditorium gaining weight, it might be because they had one of these fried samosas, or it might be because they're sitting here for an hour in a sedentary fashion instead of going out for a jog. And I'm honored that you would listen to me instead of exercising. But you know, each of those makes it several hundred calorie difference. And do you credit? Do you blame the food? Do you blame the exercise? And do you blame the genetic intake? We're a society that has just simply changed from what we experienced evolutionarily. We're in a world of plenty in food after surviving until the last 100, 200 years. What was a world where you were at significant risk of not getting enough food. We've grown several inches just because of nutritional improvements over the last century. So, because of the individualized nature of what causes obesity, using a class action mechanism to sue defendants for their role in causing obesity creates problems. The common issues don't predominate. You can't sue the maker of the Indian food here because everybody had a different amount of Indian food, everybody has different exercise patterns, everybody has different genetics, and in fact, many of the people in this room are not obese. So you can't draw a clear, consistent, common line of causation from a purveyor of food to a problem of obesity. But we've had litigation over it, and it's been called by lawyers obesity litigation. So, and I've classified these into various kinds of class action litigation. I call one kind the Seinfeld yogurt shop suits, and this is, I guess, increasingly outdated, but there was an episode of Seinfeld where they were offering fat-free yogurt, and everybody said this is really tasty yogurt, and it turned out everybody gained weight from eating yogurt because it wasn't actually fat-free yogurt. So you have suits over this where somebody says, I'm selling you low-fat ice cream, and the ice cream turns out not to be all that low-fat. Somebody sues over the consumer fraud, and you know that's a legitimate claim for a class action. There's very, there are other problems in terms of the class action mechanism come into play. The principal agent problem in terms of class action lawyers and the settlements they negotiate. So in the most famous one of these cases, where a local company in Florida was selling non-fat ice cream that wasn't actually non-fat, they settled the class action, and they settled it by giving away free coupons for more ice cream to class members. So whatever these class actions are doing, they're not really contributing to a solution to the obesity problem. That's what I just said. There are other suits where a public interest law firm goes out and sues Kraft or McDonald's, saying, take this ingredient out of your product. So Kraft was sued over Oreos, McDonald's was sued over the trans fats in their French fries. There's a settlement, the lawyers get some money. But at the end of the day, you're replacing trans fats with some other kind of saturated fat or unsaturated fat. And again, what causes obesity is calories in versus calories out. So just changing the type of fat that's being used by Kraft and McDonald's, that might have other health effects to the extent that trans fats are worse for your cholesterol and worse for your heart. But it's not doing anything with vis-a-vis obesity itself. So that brings us to the larger scale suits, and this is very timely because one of these was very recently resolved in the district court. These are sort of like the tobacco side of suits, and you sue a big food company and you say you have caused large scale health problems across the world because you haven't adequately indicated in your advertising the nature of the health problems that could come from using your product, and therefore you're liable and you should pay lots of money. And that worked in the tobacco context in the 1990s, and the question is, do you translate that to big food? After the tobacco litigation, there was an Onion headline in 2000. Hershey's ordered to pay obese Americans $135 billion, and it was satirizing the nature of the tobacco litigation in that, well, people choose to smoke, but here it is, the tobacco companies are paying hundreds of billions of dollars for liability for the health problems caused by people choosing to use their products. So why not Hershey's? And it took less than 2 years for the joke of the Onion headline to actually become a real class action. And again, the basic claim is people choose to eat fast food because of the advertising. So to date, these suits have not had the popular appeal that the tobacco suits have had. So the only one we've had so far is the Pellman suit over the last 8 years in McDonald's. That one was recently thrown out for the individualized problems we've discussed. But again, highly individualized issue. Lots of different things causing the increase in input versus the decrease in output. We have much cheaper food than we did decades ago. Things that we did every day that caused us to expend calories, we don't do anymore. So, for example, 30, 40 years ago, if you wanted to wash the dishes, that was a form of exercise. You were expending calorie washing dishes. Nowadays, you put it in the machine does it. But what's the effect of that? And it doesn't take that much of a difference. If you were only burning 10 to 20 calories from washing the dishes every day, over the course of a year, that's 3,650 calories, 3,500 calories is a pound. You gain a pound a year because you're not washing the dishes anymore. And over a decade, that's 10 pounds. And that alone pretty much explains the obesity difference we've had over the issue. We have more forms of passive entertainment in terms of video games and the internet, substituting for active entertainment, playing outside. More and more restaurant meals substituting for home cooking, and restaurants want to make their food taste good, so they add fat, they add salt, they add sugar. And we smoke less than we did before, and that's good for health in one way, but in another way, we no longer have the appetite-suppressing factors of smoking. So it's not necessarily a net cost that we've had this. Portion sizes are increasing. All in all, the median weight gain that we had, the difference between how much we weigh now and how much we weighed a few decades ago, is 15 calories a day. It's not that much. It's a